You have seen the photos, the polished steel doors, the pristine white walls lit up like a movie set, the pantry stocked for 3 years, the lounge with leather couches, the gym, and the air filtration system gleaming behind glass like a museum exhibit. Bunker brochures sell a fantasy of total control, a sealed world where you ride out the storm with a glass of bourbon while the surface burns. And every year, Americans spend tens of thousands of dollars buying into that fantasy. But here is what the brochures do not tell you. According to engineers, civil defense veterans, and people who have actually lived underground, the overwhelming majority of private bunkers in this country are not survival shelters. They are expensive coffins waiting for the right disaster to seal the lid. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the bunker industry, and by the end, you will understand the fatal flaw that almost nobody is talking about. Stay with me, because what we found will change how you think about every shelter you have ever seen advertised. The bunker boom started small. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, the federal government quietly stopped funding civilian fallout shelters because the math no longer worked. By the 1990s, private contractors filled the gap. Today, companies like Atlas Survival Shelters and Rising S Company sell prefabricated steel tubes for anywhere between $40,000 for a basic unit and several $1,000,000 for a luxury complex. Demand has exploded since the pandemic. The industry estimates that roughly 200,000 private shelters now exist in the United States, with more being installed every month. The pitch is intoxicating. You buy peace of mind, you buy survival, you buy time. But here is the truth that the salesmen do not print on the glossy brochures. Buying a bunker is the easy part. The hard part is engineering, maintaining, and surviving inside one. And the tighter you look at the math, the more cracks you find in the steel. Before we go deeper, hit that subscribe button so you do not miss what is coming. We are about to walk through failure points the industry actively hides from buyers, and the last one is the reason even military shelters have collapsed under real pressure. Trust me, you will want to be here for it. Even the shelters built by people with unlimited budgets struggle to deliver on the promise. The Greenbrier bunker in West Virginia, designed during the Cold War to house members of Congress through nuclear war, required a full-time staff of dozens just to keep its filtration, food rotation, and air handling systems functional. The Mount Weather facility in Virginia, run by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, employs hundreds. These are the shelters that work, and they work because they are treated as institutions, not products. The private bunker buyer, by contrast, is one person with a checkbook and a dream, expected to do the job of an entire facility staff alone. Let's start with the failure that kills more bunker occupants in real-world tests than any other single factor: AIR. Specifically, the management of air pressure, oxygen, and carbon dioxide inside a sealed space. A typical adult exhales about a kilogram of carbon dioxide per day. Pack 4 people into a sealed 30-square-meter shelter, and within hours, carbon dioxide levels climb past 1,000 parts per million. Within a day, you are looking at headaches, nausea, and impaired judgment. Cresson Kearney, the civil defense engineer who wrote Nuclear War Survival Skills at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, demonstrated decades ago that hand-cranked ventilation, what he called the Kearney air pump, was essential equipment for any below-ground shelter. Most modern luxury bunkers ship with a single electric blower and a stack of nuclear, biological, and chemical filters rated under specifications like NBC 77, SOF, or similar military-grade ratings. Sounds reassuring until you ask the questions the salesman avoids. Has the filter been replaced in the last 5 years? Is the seal between the filter housing And the canister still gas-tight? Does the shelter maintain positive overpressure to keep contaminated air from leaking back through every cable port and bolt hole? In Switzerland, where every residential building is required by law to have a fallout shelter, civil defense inspectors test these systems on a strict schedule. In the United States, almost nobody tests theirs at all. The bunker is buried, the receipt is filed, and the owner assumes the system works because the brochure said so. Now, if you want a real plan instead of panic buying when the next crisis hits, take a look at Accessible Underground. It is a 30-day step-by-step guide for ordinary people like us covering water, food, staying in touch when the lines go down, and the basics of underground living. The tips inside pay for the guide in the first week. It is a PDF you can save to your phone or print and keep on the shelf ready whenever you need it. The link is in the description. The second failure point is water, and it bankrupts more bunker plans than any other. The standard recommendation from the Federal Emergency Management Agency is 1 gallon of water per person per day for drinking, cooking, and minimum hygiene. That number is misleadingly low. Real-world tests in confined environments, including the BIOS 3 closed ecology experiments in Russia and the more recent Mars 500 simulation, found that actual consumption climbed closer to 4 gallons per person per day once you accounted for cooking, sanitation, and basic cleanliness. A family of 4 sealed in for 30 days needs roughly 480 gallons of water. That is 2 industrial drums plus reserve. Most prefabricated shelters ship with a tank holding less than 100 gallons. Then there is the problem nobody wants to discuss, which is what happens to that water after you use it. Sewage management inside a sealed shelter is the single most overlooked engineering challenge. Methane and hydrogen sulfide build up from holding tanks. Anaerobic bacteria thrive in warm, enclosed spaces. If your composting toilet is undersized or your blackwater tank seals fail, you are not just dealing with smell. You are dealing with respiratory irritation, infection risk, and explosive gas accumulation in a space you cannot ventilate to the surface. Luxury brochures show a tiled bathroom. They do not show the math on what happens after week 2. Then, there's the climate inside. A buried steel or concrete shelter sits at a constant temperature determined by the surrounding soil, usually somewhere between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That sounds comfortable until you add 4 bodies, a generator, cooking, and breathing into the equation. Humidity climbs fast, steel walls sweat. Without active dehumidification, mold takes root within weeks. Researchers studying the closed environments of nuclear submarines and the International Space Station found that mold colonization is the single most persistent maintenance problem in any sealed habitat. Submarines spend significant resources on air scrubbing and dehumidification specifically because the alternative is respiratory illness in a crew that cannot leave. Most private bunkers come with no dehumidifier at all, or with one that runs on grid power, which will not be there when the bunker is needed. The third failure point is power. Most private shelters rely on grid electricity, a generator, and a battery bank. Each layer fails differently. Grid electricity is the first thing to go in any serious crisis. The generator is usually diesel, and that means fuel storage becomes its own hazard. Diesel degrades over time, especially when stored in warm or humid conditions, and untreated fuel can become unusable within 1 year. Running a combustion generator inside a sealed shelter requires a dedicated exhaust path, intake air for combustion, and a way to dump waste heat without overheating the living space. Done incorrectly, the generator that was supposed to save you produces carbon monoxide that kills you. Battery banks, meanwhile, have a finite cycle life. Lithium iron phosphate banks last roughly 10 years under ideal conditions and less if they are deep cycled regularly. Owners who installed their systems during the pandemic boom of 2020 are already approaching the back half of that window without realizing it. The shelter looks the same as the day it was installed, but the chemistry inside the cells does not. The fourth failure point is something the industry almost never advertises, and it has nothing to do with engineering. It's people. Specifically, the people on the surface who know you have a bunker. Operational security, commonly called OPSEC, is the unglamorous discipline of not letting anyone know what you have or where you have it. Most private bunkers fail this test before the concrete is even poured. The construction crew knows. The excavator operator knows. The county permit office almost certainly knows because in most jurisdictions, a buried structure of any meaningful size requires inspections and zoning approval. Neighbors notice deliveries. Friends mention it at dinner. By the time a real crisis arrives, your bunker is not a secret. It is a known asset in a community that has lost everything else. Dr. Bradley Garrett, a social geographer who spent years interviewing wealthy bunker owners for his book Bunker, found a recurring pattern. Owners spent vast sums on blast doors, biometric locks, and reinforced ventilation, but did almost nothing to address the social vulnerability of being known to possess a refuge in a community that has none. A blast door rated for 30 $30 per square inch of overpressure cannot stop the slow erosion of a 30-day siege by people who know you are inside. And now we arrive at the fatal flaw nobody mentions. Every problem we have walked through, the air, the water, the power, the people, traces back to a single underlying assumption that the entire industry rests on. The assumption is that you can buy your way to survival. That writing a check, signing a contract, and burying a steel tube in your backyard is sufficient. It is not. The Swiss civil defense doctrine, refined over 6 decades and considered the global gold standard, treats the shelter as the smallest part of survival. The vast majority of training time is spent on protocols: how to seal a door, how to monitor filter performance, how to ration water, how to manage a sick person in a confined space, how to make decisions under pressure when half your group wants to leave. Swiss training also covers the psychology of confinement, because confinement is what kills people first, when the equipment is fine. The Mars 500 study locked 6 volunteers in a simulated spacecraft for 520 days. Half the crew showed measurable sleep disturbance, depression, or behavioral withdrawal by month 3. Submarine crews and Antarctic researchers report similar patterns. The human mind does not tolerate sealed spaces well, and tolerance does not improve with money or thread count. A bunker is a confinement chamber, whether it costs $10,000 or $10 million. The Swiss treat their shelters like submarines, where the hardware is useless without a trained crew. American buyers treat them like vacation cabins, where the hardware is the entire product. Finland and Sweden built similar protocols during the Cold War era, with shelter capacity for much of the civilian population and regular drills that put ordinary citizens inside their shelters at least once a year. Reports from those programs consistently found that the human element accounted for more shelter failures in simulation than every mechanical system combined. The training was the point. The Finnish doctrine assumed the equipment would work. The training existed because the equipment was not the problem. The problem was whether you could run it correctly when you were exhausted, frightened, hungry, and surrounded by people you love who were also exhausted, frightened, and hungry. That gap in mindset is the fatal flaw. It is why a family that has never spent a single night in their own bunker, never tested the filtration under load, never run a 30-day rationing exercise, has effectively bought a very expensive insurance policy that requires them to also be the insurance adjuster, the paramedic, the engineer, and the warden, all on the worst day of their lives. The shelter does not save you. The training does. And almost nobody is doing the training. Before we wrap up, one last reminder. The accessible underground guide in the description walks you through a simple 30-day plan covering topics like water, food, staying in touch with family, and the basics that turn a hole in the ground into a safe place you and your loved ones can actually live in. The link is in the description. The hard truth is that most private bunkers in the United States today are not the impregnable fortresses their owners believe them to be. They are sealed rooms with finite air, finite water, finite power, and finite social cover owned by people who have never practiced living in them. The good news is that the fix is not more steel or more concrete. It is preparation, training, and an honest assessment of what you actually have. The civil defense pioneers who built the systems we still rely on, Cresson Kearney, the Swiss federal engineers, the Cold War-era researchers at Oak Ridge, all reached the same conclusion. Survival is a discipline, not a product. The bunker industry sells you the product. The discipline is on you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. If this story changed how you view the steel doors and concrete walls of the survival industry, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the truths that the brochures try to bury. Prepare for the future. The next vault of knowledge will open soon.